welcome to the podcast, the Spooky Friends Club. We are diving into a place steeped in death, steeped in despair and restless spirits, and it's Poveglia Island in northern Italy. Now, Poveglia Island is situated in the Venetian lagoon, and if you're watching on YouTube, I'll put up a little picture. If you're just listening, don't worry. I'll do my best to explain what things look like. So, it's a place where history and horror are inseparably entwined. What began as a peaceful settlement, not like my brain today, eventually became a dumping ground for the dead during one of Europe's darkest periods, which is the Black Plague. If you're not familiar with the bubonic plague, definitely where have you been? But it was deadly. It killed most of Europe, an entire generation. But this was only the beginning of Poveglia's eerie and terrible fate. So, during the 14th century, the Black Plague ravaged Europe, and Venice became overwhelmed with the sick and dying. Despite the attempts to contain the disease, authorities began shipping the infected to Poveglia Island in an attempt to segregate them from the would-be healthy. Now, it effectively turned Poveglia Island into a mass grave. The dead and dying were left in piles in the streets with no one to care for them. And it's said that the island soil is nearly half human ash, a grim testament to the countless lives lost there. Now, something interesting about when I'm on the Spooky Friends Club as today's featured host, I like to dispel as much as I can, because oftentimes when we talk about the paranormal, there are people out there that like to embellish for the story. Of course, I love to embellish for the story, but I did look into the facts of this case, and it seems pretty concrete that the island the history is accurate, at least. So, even after the plague passed, Poveglia's dark history continued. In the 1920s, the island became home to a mental asylum. Now, today, I'm not sure if mental asylum is the term we would use, but it would basically be a home to the undesirables. So if you had a family member that maybe was mentally ill or maybe had a physical condition that you wanted to get out of the limelight, you would send them to an asylum back in the day, and the conditions were horrific almost always. Patients were subjected to cruel experiments and lived in constant fear. Many reported seeing ghostly figures and hearing tortured wailing echoes through the walls, even as the sort of second life of this island. It began spooky and it stayed spooky. So, one particular sinister figure that you hear when you talk about Poveglia Island, which, by the way, I don't even think people have access to anymore just because of all of the tourism that attempted to go there and people being injured. But one sinister figure was a doctor who worked at the asylum. And according to local legend, he was obsessed with the ghost stories surrounding the island. And he used those stories as an excuse to perform gruesome lobotomies on the patients there and other horrific treatments. The doctor's sadistic practices eventually caught up with him, and as the spirits... Oh, my camera got suddenly dark as I was talking about that. As the spirits of the island sought their revenge, he was driven mad. And so the ghosts that he was there to study, or whatever his excuse was, tormented him so badly that he ended up throwing himself from the asylum's bell tower, effectively becoming a ghost himself, but it didn't end his torment. Now, the story of the sinister doctor on Poveglia Island, who allegedly performed these lobotomies and horrible treatments, and also being driven mad by the spirits, is largely rooted in legend and folklore, so not to be a wet blanket, but rather than documented historical evidence, it's more so just a story. And I know that's not something that we all want to hear, but it's something that we should definitely look into. So upon doing my research, while Poveglia Island does have a really dark and well-documented history with the plague and later the site of the asylum, specific details about the doctor performing lobotomies and subsequent subsequently injuring himself to the point of no return, are not a part of the island's, they're just a part of the island's lore. There's not a lot of evidence to suggest, and it doesn't even say a timeline in which the doctor allegedly jumped out of the bell tower. So the tale of the doctor is often repeated in ghost stories and paranormal accounts, but there is no reliable historic record to confirm these events. The story is likely a mix of urban legend and a little bit of embellishment. And the story is passed down from generation to generation. So we all know how that can amplify a local legend into something even more. Think like Bloody Mary. So in short, the story of the doctor, while it adds to the local mystique of the island, it should be treated as folklore rather than factual history. Still spooky nonetheless. Now, since the asylum closed in 1968, Poveglia has remained abandoned. You can get to it by boat, but visitors who dare to set foot on the island report feeling a suffocating sense of dread, and that's a quote from people who have been there. And many have experienced unexplained phenomena such as cold, invisible hands that grab at their skin, and strange shadows that move out of sight, and whispers carried on the wind. So it's as if the island itself is alive with the tortured souls of those who lived there before. That's what's being reported. Whether that's true or not, we might never know. So another story, and it's particularly chilling, that comes out of paranormal investigations that have occurred on the island. So people who've spent the night at Poveglia say they began to hear faint, disembodied voices, first distant and then growing louder, which is always something that you want to have happen at night. Think of La Llorona. They captured eerie images of figures darting through the ruins, and one investigator felt a sudden, forceful shove that knocked him to the ground. The group cut their investigation short, fleeing the island at first light, vowing never to return. Now, there are some documented tales on the internet. They seem like hearsay, but there have been people who've taken cameras to the island. Poveglia is a place where the line between the living and the dead may be blurred. It's not just a haunted island, it's a place of perpetual torment, where the cries of the past seem to echo through the ruins, the spirits trapped there to remain restless, forever bound to the horrors that they endured. To this day, as I mentioned, Poveglia is very difficult to get to. It is off limits to the public, so it's not a place that you can just simply visit. Though I have heard stories online, now this is hearsay, that you can bribe the right people to get there, but I do not recommend that in any way, shape, or form. So for those out there who are saying that people have gone to the island, they likely did it illegally. It's a place where the past refuses to be forgotten, where the dead continue to reign, and where even the bravest souls find themselves haunted long after they leave. Sounds like me after the Conjuring house. So, what are your thoughts? I always love to hear from everyone else out there who have experienced paranormal activity. Do you think that Poveglia Island is simply misunderstood? As I mentioned, some of these stories have been embellished over time. Paranormal investigators will always sort of, and I'm not going to be popular for saying this, but they will fake it for the views. I'm not going to call out anyone in general, not yet at least. But people do fake things for views, so do be careful out there. Poveglia Island, definitely very spooky. We've talked about it on TikTok a few times, and today was just one of those days. So thank you so much for joining me into this journey into the darkness. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure you subscribe and drop me a like. It helps me make sure that I know that I'm doing a good job. And, if you have tales of your own or experiences, please visit www.spookyfriendsclub.com. Drop me a note there. It goes right to me. And I love to hear from your experiences, and we will feature them in future podcasts. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and stay spooky from the shadows.